Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to look at a further variation of my orbs technique that I showed in a video the other day. And it's a technique by which you create almost an orb mosaic. It is a long process, it does take a few fiddly steps, so perhaps, and I can't believe I'm saying this, don't watch the video right through straight away. Watch some of it, go away and practice, come back, watch a bit more, use it as a reference video, not as purely entertainment, and give it all a go. It'll take you through all the techniques you need, and I hope you find it useful. Thank you for watching. The first stage of creating our orbed grid, or as I might refer to it as a grid mosaic, which works quite nice, is to start with a new image, a new file. So if we click on File and we come down to New, it's based on polar coordinates, so it has to start with a square file. And what we're going to do here is I've set it up to start with 6000 by 6000 square image. You'll see here with a black background. Because I'm going to be dropping JPEGs into it, I'm using RGB color, 8-bit, and I've got my color profile set at RGB. Just make sure all of those works with the photos that you're dropping in. If you're using a 16-bit raw file in ProPhoto RGB, then make sure it works right. Create. That was the techie bit. We now have a square file, 6000 by 6000 pixels filled with black. The next stage is to fit a grid on top of it. Now this is a 5 by 5 grid, so each of the grids are going to be at 20% of the total width. But if I drop it straight on the background layer, I then can't slot the photos above the background layer and below the grid. Hope you're following. So I'm going to add a new layer. That's a layer of total transparency. You'll notice at the moment my foreground and background colors down at the bottom of the tools palette here are set to black foreground color, white background color. I'm now going to start filling in a grid on this in white. So I'm going to exchange those colors over. The shortcut key for that is just X for exchange. It's not E for a reason. And we're going to select the perimeter of this square by effectively selecting all. Control A, Command A on a Mac, and you get a set of marching ants all the way around the perimeter of this. The active layer at the moment is that layer 1, that's fine. And we're going to stroke a white line around the outside of this. I've chosen, for the purposes of this demo, to make it 30 pixels wide, but if I go Edit, and we go down here to Stroke, you will see I've already set that up, that the width is 30 pixels. You can change that. The color defaults to the foreground color, so it's set to white. And you'll notice that the location here says center. If your selection, i.e. the marching ants, are right on the edge of your canvas, and you try to stroke a line on the outside, let's say, of that selection, you're trying to effectively paint outside the canvas, so nothing will show. If you choose the center, you'll get 15 pixels of a 30 pixel line outside the canvas, so you won't see them, and only 15 pixels visible on the inside. The only way to see all of them, of course, there is to go on the inside and click OK. And there we have, let's take away the marching ants, and there we have the outside of our bounding box effectively for our selection. Now we need to select horizontal and vertical lines equally spaced for a 5 by 5 grid. Easiest way to do this, of course, is to put a grid on the image and then stroke the lines along those grid lines. Shortcut key for a grid is hold the Control key down, Command on a Mac, and just hit the inverted comma. Otherwise you can go up to View, and I think there's an option for grid there. You will see here my grid is not set to 5 by 5. In fact, it's set at 12.5% of the width, so we get that's 25%, that's 50%, that's 75%, and that's the lot. So it's not going to work with this grid. That lets me show you that if you go to Edit and you drop down here to Preferences and you go up here to Guides, Grids and Slices and we click on there. Here's my grid option. At the moment I've got grid lines set at every 12.5%. Now you can set grid lines at pixel widths, at inches, at centimetres, at millimetres, at points, at picas. But percent to me makes far more sense. It means you're going to get, irrespective of the size of your canvas, whether you're working on a 400 by 400 pixel photo or a 4000 by 4000 pixel photo, you're going to get the same number of grid lines. I think percent is by far the best way to work with grids, and it makes the maths much easier. So I know here I need a grid line every 20%. Then I will get a grid if I get 5 grids across. I'm just going to click on OK. And there we have 5 across, 5 down. All I need to now do is to stroke on each one of those grid lines. Unfortunately, you can't just click a selection button for it. So I'm going to go up to the marquee tool here. Most of you will be perfectly familiar with the marquee tool and maybe with the selection options here. But I'm going to run through them very, very quickly, just for those who aren't. You can fast forward about a minute otherwise. The first selection there is new selection. So if I click and drag, I get a selection of a rectangle. If I click and drag again here, I get a new rectangle, and so on. The second one, which is the only other one I'm going to show you, means I can add to existing selections, which is brilliant, and that works great. Deselect those. Also, hiding under this marquee tool, you've got the rectangular and the elliptical, which I think most people will be familiar with, but you also have the single row marquee tool and the single column marquee tool. Now these are two I've never really found much use for up until doing this sort of thing. And again, you've got exactly the same selection options here. So I can add to the existing selection. This saves me select one line, stroke it, select the next line, stroke it, and so on. All I need to do is come down here onto that line, I'll select that column. I'll come down there, I'll select that column and that. I'm saying columns, I mean rows, and that row. I'm now going to switch, they're still selected, to the single column marquee tool. Provided I have the add to existing, I can now select that, select that, select that, and select that. I now have, I'm hoping, all 5 rows and all 5 columns all selected. We'll soon find out. If we now go up to Edit, and again we drop down to Stroke, this time I am going to put it in the center because I just want it absolutely down the middle of those lines, and I'm going to click on OK. And there we now have our perfect 5 by 5 grid. If I take the zoom tool and I zoom right in, you can see that they are perfectly situated on those selections. I turn the grid off and I deselect. There we have our grid set on a plain black background. Save the file. Save the file and you can use it again and again and again and again. The next stage of the process is, of course, to select the photos you want to include within the grid. And I've selected 24 pictures here which relate to the recent 75th anniversary of VE Day. I just thought that would make an attractive little mosaic. Having selected them, I want to export them as JPEGs into a subdirectory which I can then resize them to square pictures. So let's just do that. I'm going to click on Control A, Command A on a Mac to select everything. Click on Export, and I'm going to put it under my D drive, and they were taken in 2020 on the 5th, on the 8th, so that will do as a subdirectory. I'm going to send them out at the moment as 2000 by 2000 pixels because they're going to be resized when they're squared off anyway. And we click on Export, and that's that. The next stage is to open them up in Photoshop and to resize them. Now we're in Photoshop. The next stage is to resize each of those photos to a square. So I'm going to show you on one, and then I'm going to do the lot because I've written an action for it, and it's so simple. I will deal with actions under a separate YouTube video. Here's a photo, image size, and remember we've got a 1200 by 1200 grid to make up to those, so I'm going to make it 1200 by 1200. There we go. Click on OK. There's the result, and save that. As I said, I've written an action in order to resize these, so I'm just going to go File, Automate, and Batch. Under Batch, I can choose the appropriate action here, which you can see is written at 1200 square, and I'm browsing for the correct folder here, that one there. And I just click on OK, and it's going to get on with it. You'll notice it will just run through, open each one of the photos, resize it, and save it. And there we have it. And the next stage is to create the final image and apply the polar coordinates. The next stage is to take all those square images and drop them into their respective positions on the grid. Where you put them depends, of course, on where they end up once you've done the polar coordinates. And because, quite simply, I had no idea how the whole thing worked, I created this grid here with all the squares numbered from 1 through 25, and then applied the twin polar coordinates filter to it, which gave me that result there. And it was interesting because I noticed number 13, which is actually the middle one. That's number 13 there, yeah. Number 13 actually is that distorted number all the way around the outside, which is why we're going to leave that blank, and we're only going to put 24 photos in it. Number 18 comes in at the bottom here, but upside down, as does number 23 there, number 3 there, and number 8 there. So that centre column all comes in upside down. Therefore, if we want them the right way up, when we load the photos, we have to flip them. 17 and 19 come in there, but sideways. 7 and 9, I had to underline it to work out whether that was 6 or 9, come in there, but sideways, the other sideways. I actually sketched this out on a piece of paper and just put the arrows in as to how things need to be changed. You don't need to do it. If you're going for just a total abstract effect. It doesn't matter whether they're upside down or the right way up, but if you're trying to do it like a sort of mosaic or montage, it might be worth considering turning around those that you want to appear sort of the right way up. However, I thought you might find that of interest. Okay, we now come to the final part of this process, which is in some ways the tedious bit. It's taking the 24 photos and slotting them into this grid. It's important that we put them above the background layer, but below layer 1. So I'm going to activate the background layer here. I now have to open all of those files that we'd already created. I'm just going to hit Control O for open, Command O on Mac, and if I click on Control A, select all of them, click open, there we have it. And it's difficult, obviously it's impossible to see all 24 photos plus the grid on your screen here. You can go Window, Arrange, 6 up. I'm pretty happy with 2 up vertical as well. What I really want to do is I want to take the very first one here, the grid itself, and pull that just across to there, and take that photo and pull that across to there. Because I kind of know where I want everyone to be positioned, I'm quite happy working this way. Work whatever way suits you. I won't talk through the next bit. All I'm going to do is take each of those photos and drag them into the grid, into their appropriate positions. It can take a little while to get them fairly precisely fitted into their squares, but do spend the time, it does look better. Needless to say, this part of the video will just get sped up. Once you've dropped all the photos into the grid, remember to rotate those which you feel need rotating, which I'll do now. And there it is. Whilst you have all those layers there, save the file. Much better to save it as a layered file, because if you made a mistake or you want to go back and reconfigure some of it, swap some of the pictures round, you can always open that saved version and have a go. So that's the file saved and everything tidied up just a little bit. Now the next stage, flatten the files. Remember to do that. That's flattened. Duplicate the layer, Control J, J for duplicate. And this is exactly the same as my previous orbs video, but I will run through it very quickly. It's just filter, distort, polar coordinates. We take these in effectively alphabetical order. P comes before R, so we do polar to rectangular first. We then edit, transform, rotate 180 degrees, and then we go filter, distort, polar coordinates again, and this time it's R rectangular to polar. Click on OK. And there we have our completed orb mosaic of the VE Day celebrations. Hope you've enjoyed the demonstration. Thank you for sticking with it. Please do subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again next time.